The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of the Mercer Estate, sprawling mansion perched on the cliffs of Monterey, California. Rosalie Bennett, 24 years old, with warm hazel eyes and dark curly hair, clutched her cleaning supplies nervously as she walked through the marble hallway. She had been working as a housekeeper for only 3 days, and every corner of this magnificent home still felt like a maze to her. Rosalie came from a simple background in a small coastal town. She had taken this job because the pay was exceptional, and she desperately needed the money. Her beloved grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents died, needed expensive medical treatments that insurance refused to cover. This job was her lifeline, and she could not afford to make any mistakes. The wrong door that morning, her supervisor, Mrs. Helena Foster, had given her a list of rooms to clean in the West Wing. The instructions seemed clear enough. Start with room 304, work your way down, and avoid the master suite at all costs. Mr. Mercer valued his privacy above all else. Rosalie counted the doors carefully as she moved down the corridor. She stopped at what she thought was room 304, checked her list twice, and gently turned the handle. The door swung open silently, and she stepped inside. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Pacific Ocean. Elegant furniture in shades of cream and navy blue created a peaceful atmosphere. But before she could admire the view, she heard it. The sound of running water from the bathroom. Her stomach dropped like a stone. This was not an empty room. The encounter through the partially open bathroom door. Rosalie caught a glimpse of a man standing under a rainfall shower. Steam filled the space, creating an almost dreamlike haze. Her heart nearly stopped. She recognized him instantly from the photographs displayed throughout the estate. Julian Mercer himself. Panic seized her completely. Rosalie stumbled backward, her foot catching on the edge of an expensive Persian rug. She fell hard onto the marble floor, her cleaning supplies scattering everywhere with a loud crash that echoed through the room. The water stopped immediately. Julian grabbed a towel and wrapped it around himself before stepping out of the bathroom. His dark hair was wet, water droplets sliding down his shoulders. His blue-gray eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her freeze. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 32 or 33, with strong features and an athletic build. But what struck her most was the vulnerability in his expression, quickly replaced by guarded reserve. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was deep and controlled, but she heard the edge of frustration beneath it. Mortification and apology. Rosalie scrambled to her feet, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She could barely form words. "I am so sorry, sir. I thought this was room 34. I must have miscounted the doors. I am new here, and I made a terrible mistake." Julian studied her face for a long moment. He saw genuine distress in her eyes, not curiosity or malice. Her hands trembled as she gathered her scattered supplies, and she refused to look directly at him. "This is the master suite," he said, his tone softening slightly. "You should not be anywhere near this wing."
"I know."
"I am so sorry," Rosalie repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them away fiercely. "Please, I need this job. It will never happen again." Something in her desperate plea made Julian pause. He had dealt with countless staff members over the years, but something about this young woman felt different. There was an honesty about her that he rarely encountered in his world of wealth and pretense. "Leave now," he said finally. "We will discuss this later." Rosalie did not need to be told twice. She fled from the room as if her life depended on it, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Aftermath and reflection. Julian stood alone in his suite long after she left, water still dripping from his hair onto the towel around his shoulders. He should have been angry. Staff mistakes were unacceptable in his household. Yet somehow he could not summon the fury he normally felt when his privacy was invaded. Those frightened hazel eyes stayed with him. The way her voice had cracked when she begged to keep her job, the genuine remorse in every word. In his world, people usually wanted something from him. Money, connections, status, but she had only wanted to escape and keep. The job that clearly meant everything to her Julian walked to the window and stared out at the crashing waves below. He had built his technology empire through discipline and emotional control. After his father's betrayal and his mother's abandonment, he had learned to trust no one. He kept people at a distance, surrounded himself with employees rather than friends, and never let anyone see beyond the carefully constructed walls around his heart. Yet something about Rosalie Bennett had slipped through his defenses in that brief, awkward encounter. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. She was just a housekeeper, a staff member who had made a careless error. Nothing more. Facing the consequences meanwhile, Rosalie hid in the service pantry near the kitchen, trying to calm her racing heart. She pressed her back against the cool wall and covered her face with her hands. What had she done? She had violated the most important rule of the household. Never disturb Mr. Mercer. Never enter his private spaces. Mrs. Foster would surely fire her. Rosalie would lose the income she desperately needed, and her grandmother would suffer because of her carelessness. The thought made her chest tighten with fear. Hours passed as she kept to the shadows, completing tasks in the farthest corners of the estate. Every footstep made her jump. Every voice in the distance made her heart race. She avoided everyone, staying invisible like a ghost haunting the mansion. Late that afternoon, Mrs. Foster finally found her in the linen closet, folding sheets with mechanical precision. "Miss Bennett," the older woman said, her voice unreadable. "Come with me," Rosalie followed on shaking legs, certain she was about to be dismissed. They walked to a small office near the kitchen, and Mrs. Foster closed the door behind them. The silence felt suffocating. "Mr. Mercer spoke with me about this morning's incident," Mrs. Foster began. Rosalie's eyes filled with tears. "I am so sorry. It was entirely my fault. I will pack my things." To her shock, Mrs. Foster's stern expression softened just a fraction. "You are not being dismissed," she said quietly. "Mr. Mercer said, you are to continue your duties. However, you must be far more careful. There will be no second chances." Relief flooded through Rosalie so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise I will do better." It's an unexpected kindness that evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. Rosalie found herself assigned to organize the estate's library. The room was magnificent. With walls lined with thousands of books and comfortable leather chairs positioned near a stone fireplace, she moved quietly among the shelves, running her fingers gently over leather spines, inhaling the comforting scent of old paper. For the first time that day, she felt herself begin to relax. "You look more at peace here." The voice startled her so badly that she nearly dropped the book in her hands. Rosalie spun around to find Julian Mercer standing in the doorway. He had changed into casual clothes, dark jeans, and a simple gray sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more handsome. "Sir," she managed, her voice trembling, "I did not hear you come in." Julian stepped into the room, keeping a respectful distance. "I did not mean to frighten you," paused, studying her face. "You love books." It was not a question, but an observation. Rosalie nodded slowly. "Reading was an escape when I was younger. Books took me to places I could never afford to visit." "I understand that feeling," Julian said softly. Surprising himself with the admission, they stood in comfortable silence for a moment. The only sound, the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. "You are doing fine," Julian said finally. "Do not let this morning define your time here." Rosalie looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes she had not expected. Kindness, understanding, maybe even loneliness that mirrored her own. "Thank you." "Sir," she whispered. Julian nodded and left as quietly as he had arrived. But something had shifted between them in that brief exchange. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives had just become irrevocably connected. Rosalie stood alone in the library long after he left, her heart beating with an emotion she could not quite name. She had survived the worst day of her professional life, and somehow, impossibly, she had also glimpsed something real in the eyes of a man who lived behind walls taller than his mansion. The story of Rosalie Bennett and Julian Mercer had only just begun. The days following the bathroom incident passed with careful precision. Rosalie arrived before dawn each morning, determined to prove her worth and erase the memory of her catastrophic mistake. She kept her head down, worked twice as hard as anyone else, and avoided the West Wing entirely unless absolutely necessary. Yet despite her best efforts to remain invisible, she found herself crossing paths with Julian Mercer more often than seemed possible in a mansion of such enormous size. At first, she assumed it was coincidence. A shared moment in the hallway, a brief encounter in the garden, his unexpected appearance in whatever room she happened to be cleaning. But after 2 weeks, even Rosalie could not deny the pattern. Julian was seeking her out, though neither of them acknowledged it directly. The library assignment one Thursday morning. Mrs. Foster called Rosalie into her office with an unusual request. "Mr. Mercer has asked for your assistance with a special project," the supervisor said, her expression carefully neutral. "He wants his personal library cataloged and reorganized. The collection has grown substantially, and he needs someone detail-oriented to handle it." Rosalie's heart skipped. Me. But surely there are more experienced staff members who could do that better. "He requested you specifically," Mrs. Foster replied. "You will report to the library each morning at 9. The project may take several weeks." As Rosalie walked toward the library that first morning, her stomach twisted with nervous energy. She told herself it was just a job assignment. Nothing more. Yet her hands trembled slightly as she pushed open the heavy wooden doors. Julian was already there, standing by the windows with a cup of coffee, watching the ocean waves crash against the cliffs below. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Miss Bennett," he said warmly. "Thank you for agreeing to help with this." "Of course, sir. I am happy to assist." Rosalie set down her notebook and surveyed the thousands of books surrounding them. "Where would you like me to start?" Conversations between the shelves, what began as a simple cataloging project, slowly transformed into something neither of them expected. Julian found reasons to work in the library each day, his laptop open on the large oak desk. Though Rosalie noticed he spent more time watching her than focusing on his screen. They began talking. Small conversations at first, about favorite books and authors. But gradually the discussions deepened. "Why did you take this job?" Julian asked one afternoon as Rosalie climbed down from a ladder, her arms full of vintage novels. She hesitated, unused to such direct personal questions from her employer. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She sacrificed everything for me. Now she needs expensive medical treatments, and I need to help her the way she helped me." Julian listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard. "That is a rare kind of loyalty," he said quietly. "Most people would find excuses to avoid such responsibility." "She is the only family I have," Rosalie replied simply. "Love is not about convenience." Something flickered in Julian's eyes, an emotion she could not quite identify. Sadness, perhaps. Or recognition. The walls come down over the following weeks. Julian began sharing pieces of his own story. Not the public narrative of the tech prodigy who had built a billion-dollar empire, but the private truth he had never told anyone. "My father embezzled millions from his business partners when I was 19, Julian confessed one rainy afternoon. They sat in comfortable chairs near the fireplace, the sound of rain against windows creating an intimate atmosphere. He destroyed countless lives and felt no remorse. My mother left us both when the scandal broke. She could not handle the shame." Rosalie listened without judgment, her heart aching for the young man he had been. "I spent years rebuilding the family name through my own company," Julian continued. "I paid back every person my father harmed, even though legally I had no obligation. But the experience taught me to trust no one, to keep everyone at a distance." "That sounds incredibly lonely," Rosalie said softly. Julian met her eyes. "It has been." Until recently, the air between them grew charged with unspoken meaning. Rosalie looked away first, her cheeks flushing. This was dangerous territory. He was her employer, a billionaire, someone completely out of her league. Yet her heart refused to listen to logic. The crisis 3 weeks into the library project, Rosalie received a phone call that shattered her fragile peace. Her grandmother's condition had deteriorated suddenly. She needed emergency surgery that would cost over $200,000. Far more than Rosalie's insurance would cover. Julian found her in the library that afternoon, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her phone in disbelief. "Rosalie," he said, using her first name for the first time. "What happened?" The story poured out of her in broken sentences. The surgery, the impossible cost, her feelings of helplessness. Julian listened, his jaw tightening with determination. "How much do you need?" he asked. Rosalie shook her head firmly. "No, I cannot accept money from you. That is not why I told you." "I know that," Julian said gently. "But I can help and I want to. Please let me." "I will pay you back," Rosalie insisted, her pride warring with desperation. "Every penny, even if it takes years." Julian reached out and took her hand, the first time he had touched her beyond accidental brushes in passing. The contact sent electricity through them both. "We will figure out the details later. Right now, your grandmother needs you. Go to her. Your job will be waiting when you return." The hospital vigil. Rosalie spent 3 days at the hospital while her grandmother underwent surgery and recovery. The operation was successful, thanks to Julian's immediate financial intervention. But as Rosalie sat in the sterile waiting room, gratitude warred with confusion in her heart. Why had Julian helped her so generously? Was it simple kindness or something more? And why did the thought of returning to the mansion fill her with anticipation rather than mere relief? On the 4th day, exhausted but hopeful, Rosalie returned to the Mercer Estate. She went directly to the library, somehow knowing she would find him there. Julian stood at the window, his posture tense. When he heard her enter, he turned quickly, relief flooding his features. "How is she? Recovering well, thanks to you?" Rosalie's voice trembled. "I do not have the words to thank you properly." "You do not owe me anything," Julian said, moving closer. "Helping you was not about obligation or debt. It was about caring what happens to someone who has become important to me." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Rosalie's heart pounded. "Sir, I do not understand what is happening here." "Neither do I," Julian confessed. "For years, I have kept everyone at arm's length. I built walls so high that nothing could touch me. But somehow you walked through those walls without even trying." He paused, searching her face. "You see me, Rosalie? Not the money, not the reputation. Just me." A dangerous line. Rosalie knew she should step back, maintain professional distance. This was her employer. A relationship between them violated every unwritten rule. Yet her heart had already made its choice. "I see someone who pretends to be cold, but has the kindest heart I have ever known," she whispered. "Someone who paid off his father's debts, even though he did not have to. Someone who saved my grandmother's life without asking for anything in return." Julian closed the distance between them, stopping just inches away. "I have never felt this way about anyone," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You terrify me, Rosalie Bennett. Because caring about someone means they can hurt you." "I would never hurt you," Rosalie promised. "I know," Julian replied. "That terrifies me most of all." For a long moment they simply stood together, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing down on them both. Neither moved to close the final distance. They stood on the edge of something that could change everything, both afraid to take the leap. Finally, Julian stepped back, his expression conflicted. "You should rest. You have been through a lot." Rosalie nodded, understanding that he needed time to process emotions he had kept buried for years. "Thank you again for everything." As she left the library, neither of them knew that someone had been watching from the shadows. Someone who would use what they had witnessed to threaten everything they were building together. Whispers and warnings. The following week passed in a strange tension. Julian and Rosalie continued their work in the library, but a new awareness colored every interaction. Meaningful glances. Hands that almost touched. Conversations loaded with subtext. Other staff members began to notice. Whispers followed Rosalie through the halls. Some were kind, others jealous. Mrs. Foster called her in for a quiet warning about maintaining appropriate boundaries. Though her tone was more concerned than accusatory, "Mr. Mercer is a good man," the older woman said carefully. But his world is very different from yours. People will judge. They will assume the worst. You must be careful, child." Rosalie appreciated the advice, but could not stop the feelings growing in her heart. She had tried to maintain distance, tried to see Julian as simply her employer, but the connection between them had grown too strong to deny. Meanwhile, Julian struggled with his own turmoil. He had spent years building emotional walls, convincing himself that isolation was strength. Now those walls were crumbling, and he did not know whether to fight the change or embrace it. His business associates noticed his distraction. Board meetings were cut short. Important decisions were delayed. Julian Mercer, known for his laser focus and emotional control, was becoming someone even he did not recognize. Yet when he was with Rosalie, everything felt right. The world made sense in a way it never had before. She challenged him, comforted him, made him want to be better. For the first time in his adult life, Julian wondered if perhaps love was worth the risk. The setup had known to both of them. Someone was watching their growing closeness with malicious intent. Trevor Hastings, Julian's business rival and former friend, had placed a spy among the household staff months ago. The information about Julian's feelings for a housekeeper was exactly the kind of ammunition Trevor needed. Trevor had been waiting years for revenge after Julian had exposed his fraudulent business practices, costing him millions and his reputation. Now he saw his opportunity to destroy Julian's carefully constructed image and business empire. The trap was being set, and Rosalie and Julian, lost in their growing feelings for each other, had no idea that their relationship was about to become a weapon used against them both. The peaceful days in the library were numbered. Soon, they would face a choice that would test everything they felt for each other and determine whether love could survive in the harsh spotlight of the world beyond the mansion walls. On a misty Saturday morning, Rosalie arrived at the mansion earlier than usual. She had volunteered to help Mrs. Foster prepare for a charity event Julian was hosting that evening. As she walked through the quiet halls, she noticed light coming from beneath the door of a room she had never been allowed to enter. Curiosity got the better of her. The door was slightly open, and she could hear Julian's voice inside, speaking softly on the phone. Rosalie knew she should walk away, but something in his tone made her pause. "Yes, send the payment directly to the children's hospital," Julian was saying. "Make sure it remains anonymous. I do not want any publicity." Pause. "The scholarship fund as well. 50 full rides for students from low-income families. And the housing project for homeless veterans needs another $2 million to complete Phase 3. Rosalie's breath caught. She leaned closer, her heart pounding. "No press releases," Julian continued firmly. "No photo opportunities. These people need help, not a publicity stunt. My name stays off everything." She heard him hang up, and quickly she stepped back from the door. But not before glimpsing the interior of the room. The walls were covered with photographs, letters, and documents, children's drawings with thank you messages. Letters from families whose medical bills had been mysteriously paid. Articles about anonymous donations to struggling communities. This was not the office of a ruthless billionaire. This was the secret heart of a man who had spent years quietly trying to make up for his father's sins by helping thousands of people, all while maintaining a public image of cold detachment. A misunderstanding that evening's charity event was the social highlight of the season. The mansion filled with elegantly dressed guests, influential politicians, and business leaders. Rosalie worked behind the scenes, helping serve champagne and ensuring everything ran smoothly. She watched Julian from across the crowded ballroom. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and making small talk. But she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. He was performing a role, playing the part expected of him. During a quiet moment, their eyes met across the room. Julian's expression softened and he began moving toward her. But before he could reach her, a beautiful woman in a stunning red dress intercepted him. Victoria Ashford, daughter of a prominent senator, placed her hand possessively on his arm. Rosalie watched as Victoria laughed at something Julian said, standing far too close. She saw the woman whisper in his ear, saw Julian's polite but distant response. Yet from her perspective, it looked like intimate conversation between two people who belonged in the same world. Mrs. Foster appeared beside Rosalie. "That is Victoria Ashford," she said quietly. "Mr. Mercer's family has been trying to arrange a marriage between them for years. She comes from the right background, has the right connections. The perfect match, according to society." The words hit Rosalie like physical blows. She had been fooling herself. Julian might care for her, but he lived in a world where feelings were secondary to social expectations and business arrangements. A poor housekeeper could never truly fit into his life. The confrontation later that night. After the guests had departed and the staff had cleaned up, Rosalie found herself alone in the library. She had come to return some books to their proper places. But really, she needed a moment to process her swirling emotions. Julian found her there. Still wearing his tuxedo, but with the bow tie loosened and the jacket discarded, he looked exhausted but relieved the event was over. "There you are," he said softly. "I have been looking for you all evening." Rosalie kept her back to him, focusing on the books in her hands. "You seemed quite occupied with Miss Ashford." Julian moved closer, hearing something in her voice. "Victoria means nothing to me. Our families have been pushing for an arrangement, but I have no interest in that kind of relationship, because she is not from your world," Rosalie asked, finally turning to face him. "Oh wait, she is exactly from your world. I am the one who does not belong." Understanding dawned in Julian's eyes. "Rosalie, do not do this. Do not let fear push us apart." "I saw your secret room today," Rosalie said, changing the subject abruptly. "All those donations, all that help you give anonymously. Why do you hide it?" Julian looked stunned. "You are not supposed to see that. Why hide your goodness?" Rosalie pressed. "Why let the world think you are cold and unfeeling when you have helped thousands of people?" "Because my father used charity as a cover for his crimes," Julian said, his voice raw. "He made donations and attended events while stealing millions behind the scenes. I refuse to use kindness as a public relations tool. If I help people, it will be because it is right, not because it makes me look good." Rosalie's anger dissolved into understanding. Every wall Julian had built, every defensive barrier, came from a place of deep hurt and determination to be different from the man who had betrayed everyone. "You are nothing like your father," she said gently.
"I know,"
Julian replied. "Because of people like you who help me remember that wealth should serve others, not just ourselves." He took a deep breath. "Rosalie, I am in love with you. I have been fighting it for weeks, but I cannot anymore. You have changed everything. The impossible choice." Rosalie's heart soared and broke simultaneously. "Julian, I love you too. But love is not enough. Your world and mine are too different. Tonight proved that." "Then I will change my world," Julian said fiercely. "I will step away from the social expectations and the arranged marriages. I will build a life with you if you let me." "And what happens when your business suffers because of me?" Rosalie challenged. "When your social standing crumbles. When people judge you for being with a housekeeper. You have worked so hard to overcome your father's shame. I will not be the reason you lose everything." Julian closed the distance between them and took her hands. "You are not listening. You are everything. The business, the reputation, the social standing, none of it matters if I lose you." Tears streamed down Rosalie's face. "How can we make this work?" "The whole world will be against us." "Let them be against us," Julian said. "I have spent my entire adult life living for others' approval, trying to make up for my father's sins. But I cannot sacrifice my chance at real happiness to please people who do not care about anything but appearances." The threat emerges before Rosalie could respond. The library doors burst open. Trevor Hastings strode in, followed by two tabloid photographers. Cameras flashed as they captured Julian and Rosalie standing close together, her hands in his, tears on her face. "What a touching scene," Trevor said mockingly. "The billionaire and the maid? This will make tomorrow's headlines absolutely explosive." Julian moved protectively in front of Rosalie. "Get out, Trevor, now." "Oh, I am leaving," Trevor replied smugly. "But these photos are going straight to every major publication. Your pristine reputation will be destroyed." The board will force you out. All because you could not keep your hands off the help. He left with the photographers, their mission accomplished. In the sudden silence, Rosalie and Julian stood frozen, realizing their private relationship had just become public scandal. "I am so sorry," Rosalie whispered. "This is my fault." "No," Julian said firmly. "This is Trevor's revenge for my exposing his fraud years ago. He has been waiting for an opportunity to destroy me." He cupped her face gently. "But I will not let him win. And I will not let this change what we mean to each other." The decision over the next 24 hours, the scandal exploded. Tabloids ran stories painting Rosalie as a gold digger and Julian as a fool. The company's board of directors demanded an emergency meeting. Social media erupted with judgment and speculation. Rosalie wanted to resign, to disappear and let Julian salvage his reputation. But Julian refused to let her sacrifice herself. Instead, he called a press conference. Standing before cameras and reporters, with Rosalie beside him, Julian did something revolutionary. He told the truth. He spoke about his father's crimes and his own years of trying to atone for them. He revealed his anonymous charitable work, every donation and scholarship fund. He talked about the walls he had built around his heart and the woman who had helped him tear them down. "Rosalie Bennett is the most honest, kind, and brave person I have ever known," Julian said. Looking directly at her, "She did not pursue me for money or status. She barely tolerated me at first, but she saw through my defenses to the person I was trying to be. If society cannot accept that I have fallen in love with an extraordinary woman because she worked as my housekeeper, then society needs to examine its values, not ours." The room erupted in questions, but Julian ignored them. He took Rosalie's hand and led her away from the cameras, away from the judgment, toward the life they would build together. 6 months later, the scandal eventually faded, as scandals do. Some business partners abandoned Julian, but others respected his honesty and stayed. The company's stock dipped, but recovered. Life moved forward. Julian and Rosalie were married in a small, private ceremony, attended only by close friends and Rosalie's grandmother, who had fully recovered. They spent their honeymoon not in an exotic resort, but volunteering at a homeless shelter. Julian had been supporting anonymously for years. Rosalie continued working, but now she directed the Mercer Foundation, the charitable organization Julian created to formalize his giving. Together, they helped thousands of people, always remembering what it felt like to struggle and need help. The mansion on the cliffs became a home filled with love, instead of lonely silence. And every evening, Julian and Rosalie would sit in the library where their relationship had deepened, reading together and planning ways to make the world better. "Do you ever regret it?" Rosalie asked one quiet evening. "Choosing me, despite everything it cost." Julian pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I regret only the years I wasted building walls instead of connections. You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, that love is worth any risk, that real wealth is measured in relationships, not bank accounts." Rosalie smiled, remembering the terrified girl who had accidentally opened the wrong door months ago. That mistake had led to the greatest blessing of her life. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you more," Julian replied. And in the library where they had first truly seen each other, surrounded by thousands of stories, they wrote their own ending. One that proved love could bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle, and transform to broken people into something beautiful and whole. The billionaire and the housekeeper had become simply Julian and Rosalie. Two people who had found in each other the courage to be completely themselves. And that was the greatest fortune of all.